Chapter 43, Don't be shy. Night fell. Both of them had drunk quite a bit. Yingxing supported the drunken Lin Yinyin back to her room. Yes, it was Yingxing, not Yingxing. The real Yingxing had already passed out. There was no way he could have walked Lin Yinyin back. With rough but careful fingertips, Yingxing gently brushed the tip of her nose. Yinyin, sleep now, okay? He murmured. After settling her gently onto the bed, he quietly exited her room and returned to his own. He knew his time was almost up. He had carried so much for Yingxing, taken on pain, responsibility, emotion. But now, Yingxing was almost like a normal person. He no longer needed Yingxing to exist. Yingxing was fading. Even the time he could take over this body was growing shorter. 1:300. He pressed his lips together, returned to Yingxing's bedroom, and lay down to sleep. After the third mock exam ended, everyone plunged into intense revision. Time flew faster than anyone had expected. Before they knew it, June had arrived. Yingxing and Lin Yinyin were doing well. They had already agreed to apply for the same university. There was little suspense in their future. With their grades, where else could they go if not the top universities in the country? That day, their homeroom teacher walked into the classroom holding a stack of exam admission cards. I'm about to hand out your exam permits. Please don't lose them, she said seriously. If you're worried, you can leave them with me for safekeeping and collect them before the exam. Starting tomorrow, you'll have 3 days off, but don't slack off, keep reviewing. Prepare all your exam materials in advance. You can't borrow things during the gaokao, so bring extra pens, and don't panic during the test. Stay calm and answer carefully. I believe in every one of you. Make it into a great university. I'll be proud of you all. After 3 years of being together, no one knew when they'd meet again. As their homeroom teacher, she was deeply reluctant to part with her class. This class hadn't started as a particularly strong group, but ever since Lin Yinyin and Yingxing began tutoring their classmates in the evenings, everyone's performance had improved, especially the students who once struggled most. The teacher handed out the exam cards one by one. This year's gaokao exam venue was their own school, but not in their own classroom. Lin Yinyin and Yingxing were both assigned to class 3 of grade 1. During the gaokao, first and second year students didn't have class, so classrooms were made available for third years. Each exam room had 30 seats. By pure luck, both of them were placed in the same exam room, a rare coincidence. Lin Yinyin placed her and Yingxing's exam cards together, then leaned in with a playful smile and whispered in his ear, "Guess what? We're in the same exam room." Yingxing jumped slightly at her voice so close to his ear. Her hair brushed against his neck, it tickled, and his ears flushed red. Even the spot where her hair had touched turned a soft pink. He stiffened and whispered nervously, "We're still in class." Lin Yinyin didn't care. So what? Can't I whisper to my fiancé? How could Yingxing possibly say no? Okay, he said quietly. Lin Yinyin leaned even closer, then gently kissed his earlobe. Don't be shy, Yingxing, she teased. His face burned red, and his body trembled slightly. I'm not. She gave a playful huff and pressed her lips near his ear again. Then prove it. Kiss me. I'll believe you. Chapter 44, Movie Night. During evening study period, Lin Yinyin took Yingxing with her to the homeroom teacher's office, skipping class right in front of the entire room. 5 minutes later, the teacher returned with them. As the gaokao approached, no one in class could really focus anymore. The tension, the excitement, it was overwhelming. They had been battling exams for 9 long years. Now, the final fight was almost here. Even the top students had trouble concentrating now. Their teacher stepped onto the podium under everyone's curious gaze. Starting tomorrow, you won't be studying together here anymore, she said. Tonight, I'll make an exception. I'm allowing you to relax a bit. Want to watch a movie or a variety show? You choose. She'd once been a student herself, and she knew how much pressure the gaokao brought. Constant tension wasn't helpful, it could even backfire. Letting everyone unwind, just for one night, was probably the best thing she could do. The class quickly caught on. Lin Yinyin and Yingxing must have gone to request this special treat for them. Grateful glances turned toward the two of them, and soon the classroom burst into cheerful chaos. Some wanted a movie, others preferred a comedy show or music. One bold suggestion even called for playing games as a whole class. Watching them chatter excitedly, the teacher's heart felt full and heavy all at once. After 3 years of unity, who knew when they'd all be together again? Right now, everyone was joyful and radiant. Laughter lit up their faces, full of youthful glow. None of them seemed to realize that after the gaokao, they would part ways. Some of them had spent more time together than with their own families, yet in the coming years, even decades, they might never meet again. In university, in society, reunions would no longer come so easily. The teacher held back tears and tapped the desk gently. Let's go with a movie, she said with a smile. I watched one recently about high school and the gaokao. I think it's perfect for tonight. The movie was called Flying Colors, also known as Bairi Gal. It told the story of a beautiful but academically struggling girl who, with the help of tutoring, improved her grades in a year and got into a top university. A simple, passionate film, not about love or friendship, but pure determination. Everyone clapped in agreement, not just for the movie, but for the emotion behind it. They understood what their teacher was feeling, and they were starting to feel it too. Just as the projector was being set up, Duanli called out from his seat, "Miss, don't leave. Stay and watch it with us." Everyone clapped again in support. The teacher had been planning to sneak away to the office to wipe her tears alone, but when she heard Duanli's voice, she couldn't hold back anymore. Her tears fell freely. The students saw it, and as if it had been planned, no one said a word. One by one, they silently began to cry too. To watch the movie comfortably, they pushed the desks together and sat close, shoulder to shoulder. The lights went dark. Only the screen at the front glowed. By the end of the film, the tears were uncontrollable. Some cried openly, while others hugged each other tightly in silence. Many took turns embracing their teacher, and she held every one of them back, as tightly as she could. Chapter 45, Sweet, isn't it? As the movie ended, the classroom lights flicked on, flooding the room with brightness. Even though they had just taken graduation photos a few days ago, it still didn't feel like enough. Students pulled out the phones they had secretly brought and began snapping pictures. Everyone took a photo with the homeroom teacher. Aside from the teacher, the most popular person was undoubtedly Lin Yinyin. Classmates lined up to take photos with her. Lin Yinyin beamed at them and said teasingly, "I'm happy to take pictures, but you have to include my Yingxing too. You all know how easily he gets jealous." Yingxing stood silently beside her, his face blushing crimson. He said nothing, but the color on his cheeks gave him away. The classmates knew the drill and readily agreed. In the end, they invited Lin Yinyin's uncle, the school principal, to take a class photo for everyone. It was posted in the class group chat, which had once been filled with announcements and homework reminders from the teacher. One by one, students silently tapped save or marked it as a favorite. This was their youth. The homeroom teacher noticed the phones but said nothing, simply smiling. She had learned that sometimes, pretending not to see was the kindest gesture. From this moment on, they would truly go their separate ways. Take Duanli, for instance. He hated the thought of parting from Lin Yinyin and Yingxing, but there was nothing he could do. The next 4 years, they would really be apart. Seeing each other again, it would be hard. Though he tried to hold it in, Duanli, always proud and strong, broke into sobs. He turned to look at Lin Yinyin and Yingxing, planning to say something heartfelt, but what he saw left him stunned. The two of them were locked in a kiss. Yingxing noticed Duanli's gaze first. He pulled away in a panic and accidentally bumped the back of his head against the wall. Ow. Just minutes earlier, after the photos had been taken and the excitement had quieted, Lin Yinyin had turned to look at Yingxing with narrowed, mischievous eyes. She didn't say a word, but her intense gaze made it impossible for him to ignore her. Yingxing, stiff with nerves, finally turned to meet her eyes. "Yinyin, what is it?" She smiled brightly, a little wickedly. "I want to kiss you. Can I?" Yingxing, she pulled a candy from her pocket, unwrapped it slowly, and popped it into his mouth. "Is it sweet?" The strawberry flavor bloomed on his tongue, syrupy and rich. He had just opened his mouth to answer when she interrupted him. Grabbing the collar of his shirt, she pulled him close. His breath fell warm against her face, shallow and quick. He stumbled forward, losing balance, and ended up on top of her. Their bodies were pressed together. Lin Yinyin held his hand gently, smiling under the moonlight, her beauty almost ethereal. Yingxing was flustered, shy, but there was a longing stirring beneath the surface. Her flushed lips were so close to his own. He moved slightly, trying to push her away, but Lin Yinyin wasn't about to let him go. She tugged him back in, and before he could react, she leaned in and placed a kiss on his cheek. While he was still stunned, she brushed her lips softly against his. Catching a glimpse of Duanli's awkwardly averted gaze, Lin Yinyin leaned close to Yingxing's ear and whispered, "Is it sweet? I don't mean the candy, I mean me." Chapter 46, the college entrance exam. Yingxing shrank his neck slightly, his ears tingling. He glanced down at Lin Yinyin's lips, an itch in his chest. He wanted to, but couldn't bring himself to act. The college entrance exam fell in June, and right before it began, rain cooled the air, casting a refreshing chill. But by the next day, the sun blazed down again, stuffy and stifling. Fortunately, Lin Yinyin's family had a car, so she and Yingxing didn't have to endure the scorching streets. Early that morning, Lin Xiying had prepared an elaborate breakfast, much more lavish than usual. After all, his two children were about to enter the battlefield. All previous exams had been small rehearsals. This was the real deal. Though he firmly believed in their abilities, as a father, he still wanted to give them everything he could. He placed a youtiao and 2 boiled eggs at their seats. It was a small but symbolic gesture, wishing them good fortune and success. After breakfast, they got ready to leave, but as they entered the car, they discovered that the driver today wasn't the usual chauffeur. It was Lin Xiying himself. Lin Yinyin was genuinely touched. Her father might be awkward sometimes, but in moments that mattered, he never let her down. The car drove slowly. Outside, parents walked with their children. Supermarkets displayed banners cheering for the Gaokao. Some taxis even had signs that read, "Free rides for Gaokao students." Everything, it seemed, revolved around the exam. "You're not alone in this." Lin Yinyin watched the streets pass by. She rolled down the window, and a wave of heat surged in. Not every student had a car, many walked, accompanied by their parents. She even heard the parents' heartfelt reminders, "Don't be nervous. Just write what you know. Put the water bottle on the ground, not the desk. If it spills, that's a mess. Do you have everything? Don't drink too much water, you'll need the restroom. If you don't know a question, skip it and come back later. If you get stuck, don't panic. Move on and return to it. Good luck, my boy. Mom's proud of you. This is it, the Gaokao. There's only one chance. Give it everything you've got." One line after another, laced with worry and love. Sometimes, the parents were even more nervous than the students themselves. A few minutes later, the school gates came into view. Lin Xiying asked, "Want me to walk you in?" Yinyin and Yingxing shook their heads in unison. "No need. I won't leave," Lin Xiying said firmly. "I'll wait outside for your good news." They smiled in sync. Okay. They stepped out into the heat, opening umbrellas to shield themselves. The air was heavy, oppressive. At the school entrance, volunteers, former students, stood ready. Their voices rang with encouragement. Good luck on the exam. Tables had been set up offering free bottled water. Volunteers handed a bottle to every student who walked past. Yinyin and Yingxing had brought their own and politely declined, saying thank you nonetheless. They didn't want to waste it. Others might need it more. Chapter 47, Gone. The first subject of the exam, Chinese, began at 9 o'clock. When the two of them arrived, it was just 8. They followed the instructions on their admission cards and located their assigned classroom, the third room on the second floor. The doors and windows were sealed with tape, clearly not yet ready to open. Outside the classroom, several desks and chairs were stacked in a corner. Lin Yinyin pulled out 2 chairs, one for herself and one she placed in front of Yingxing, waiting for him to sit. She sat quietly, watching the stream of students passing by. Her heart stirred with mixed emotions. After all, she had once experienced this very same exam. Looking at those young, somewhat anxious faces, a wave of nostalgia and inexplicable emotion swept over her. As she observed the flow of students, she occasionally chatted with Yingxing. Time slipped by until the invigilators finally arrived. Their invigilators were all young, elegant women. One of them, surprised to see the two already waiting, said with a smile, "You two came pretty early." Lin Yinyin, polite yet playful, replied, "Of course. Teacher, won't you cheer us on?" The teacher chuckled at her unexpected response. "All right then, good luck." By the time they finished chatting, other students had started to enter the classroom. Lin Yinyin and Yingxing followed the teachers inside. Exams always made time fly. Except for biology, which she found a bit tricky, Lin Yinyin felt confident in all her subjects. But to her surprise, even the biology exam turned out to be easier than expected. She answered with ease and spent the rest of the time double-checking everything. At noon, when the school day ended, Lin Yinyin and Yingxing walked out the school gate and immediately spotted Lin Xiang waiting for them outside. Lin Yinyin hadn't expected this. She thought he'd be waiting in the car. This small gesture felt like a heartwarming surprise. The day passed quickly, and by the second day of exams, Lin Yinyin was no longer nervous. Instead, she felt a calm determination. After a day and a half, the exams were over. Everything had gone smoothly. Exhausted from the intense focus, Lin Yinyin returned to her room and collapsed into bed for a deep sleep. What she didn't expect was that this sleep would lead to regret. Maybe it was because she was overly tired. She slept for a full 24 hours straight. When she finally woke up, the first thing she did was rush to Yingxing's room. But what greeted her was an eerie emptiness. Nothing had changed in the room's layout or decor, but Yingxing was gone. The exam was over. Why would he disappear now? Panic began to rise. She hurried downstairs to look for him. Nothing. Trying to calm herself, Lin Yinyin kept whispering in her heart, "Don't panic, maybe he just stepped out for something." She dialed his number again and again. No answer. 10 times, still no answer. She sank slowly to the floor, crouching down in defeat. Aside from his contact number, she knew nothing else about his whereabouts. In desperation, she ran to Lin Sherham's room. But he wasn't home. He had spent 2 whole days accompanying her through the exam period, and now had gone to the company to deal with the backlog of work. Chapter 48, Let Fate Decide. When Lin Xiang returned from work that evening, the first thing he saw was Lin Yinyin sitting dazed on the floor. Her eyes were unfocused. Everything around her felt like an illusion. Lin Xiang knew why Yingxing had disappeared. Seeing his daughter like this, he wanted to explain. Yingxing's father had died in a car accident. The Ying family had descended into chaos, and Yingxing didn't even have time to explain to Lin Yinyin before he had to rush back to Beijing. He had intended to tell her in person, but when he entered her room and saw her sleeping peacefully, he simply stood there, watching her for a long time. Then he quietly left, leaving a message with Lin Xiang instead. Lin Xiang had supported his decision. He had promised Yingxing that he would take good care of Lin Yinyin while he was gone. The Ying family wasn't a simple household. It had numerous branches and over 100 members. Yingxing, a fresh high school graduate, was about to be thrust into a world far beyond his years. It wasn't hard to imagine what awaited him. Their dream of attending university together. That dream was now most likely shattered. Lin Xiang picked up Lin Yinyin in his arms and gently carried her back to her bed. He tucked her in and quietly left the room. Lin Yinyin said nothing. She simply stared into the air, silent. Yingxing. After a long time, she closed her eyes. She began to sort through the fragments in her mind. She had been reborn. She had returned to the day after the college entrance exam. She remembered clearly. After the exam, she had slept for what felt like forever and didn't wake until the 3rd day. And today, she should be receiving her results. Lin Yinyin was the daughter of the wealthiest man in South City in the 22nd century. But she had never been a spoiled, shallow heiress. As Lin Sherham's daughter, she had not only inherited his business acumen, but surpassed it. In just 5 years, she had helped South City's economy outpace even that of North City. Lin Xiang had become a true tycoon, and it was all thanks to her. Following the memory of her previous life, Lin Yinyin went downstairs for breakfast as usual. She looked at her much younger father and greeted him with a grin. "Morning, Dad." Lin Xiang looked at her radiant smile, but something felt off. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. If he had to name it, maybe it was that she seemed too cheerful. Cheerful? Yingxing had just disappeared. Had his daughter lost her mind? Lin Xiang examined her face carefully. Lin Yinyin smiled and teased, "Dad, why are you staring at me like that?" The Lin Xiang she remembered wasn't like this. Could it be? She hadn't just been reborn. She had entered a parallel world. Lin Xiang watched her happiness and swallowed the words on his tongue. Better to wait. Today was the day college entrance exam results came out. He didn't want to spoil her mood. After she left, Lin Xiang sat silently at the dining table. Since Yingxing had returned to Beijing, he had cut off all ties in South City. The Ying family was filled with predators. Yingxing could not afford to have a weakness. This was something Lin Xiang had agreed to. He would not allow the Lin family to be drawn into the Ying family's storm. Above all, he had to protect Lin Yinyin. And as for Yingxing, he and Lin Xiang had made a secret agreement. One that could never be told to Lin Yinyin. The agreement was this: only when Yingxing had resolved all matters with the Ying family could he reach out to her again. Until then, nothing, absolutely nothing, was allowed. Lin Xiang would never let his daughter be placed in harm's way. And as for Yingxing, whether he lived or died on that journey, that would be left to fate. Chapter 49, 10 years, Lin Yinyin received her exam results, 746 points, exactly the same as in her previous life. Doubt crept into her mind. Could this really be a parallel world? After all, many people around her seemed different now. In her past life, she barely knew Duanli, but earlier today, after collecting her results, he had embraced her and asked, "Where's Yingxing?" Lin Yinyin had no idea who that was, so she said nothing. Duanli, already used to her silence, chatted casually for a while and mentioned a gathering. Lin Yinyin politely declined. She had just arrived in this world and wasn't familiar with everyone yet. She was also afraid of slipping up. Even so, she was was genuinely happy to have gotten into the same university as in her previous life. Returning home, she hugged her father tightly and whispered, "I missed you so much." Lin Xing felt a tangled knot of emotions. He cautiously asked, "Yining, did you lose your memory?" It was the only explanation that made sense. She seemed so unlike herself, unless amnesia was involved. Startled by his question, Lin Yining paused. Yes, she had been reborn. But that was a truth she couldn't say aloud. Putting on a complicated expression, she smiled gently and said, "You caught me, Dad. You're the only person I remember." Lin Shiheng's breath hitched slightly. Then, "Do you remember who Yingxing is?" Lin Yining shook her head. "No, who's that?" Not just Lin Xing had asked about him. That same classmate, Duanli, had asked earlier too. She found it all a bit strange. "He's someone not very important," Lin Xing eventually answered, after a long pause. Lin Yining nodded lightly. Okay. She began university, choosing to live on campus and hiding her identity as the heiress of South City's wealthiest family. She quickly made friends. Everyone knew she had earned the top entrance score in the city, and many sought her help in studying. By her junior year, after leaving the library one afternoon, she found a blushing boy waiting outside. He stammered nervously, "Lin Yining, I like you. Will you be my girlfriend?" He bent slightly, offering her a pink envelope, a love letter. Looking at the shy, endearing boy, Lin Yining smiled and took the envelope. "I'll keep the letter, but give me a week to think about it." The boy hadn't dared hope she'd agree, but her response made him feel like he suddenly had a chance. Chapter 50, Headache. The boy, clearly flustered, asked, "See, can I have your contact info?" I'm afraid I won't be able to reach you." Before he could finish, Lin Yining calmly pulled out her phone and opened her WeChat QR code. "Scan it. Add me." After scanning, the boy watched her walk away, then suddenly called out, "Lin Yining, my name is Lu Xing." A voice floated back, "Lu Xing. That's a lovely name." That Friday afternoon, Lin Yining returned home, dropped her school bag on the couch, and went to wash some fruit. When Lin Xing walked in and saw the half-zipped school bag, something pink caught his eye. His fingers trembled as he pulled it out. A pink envelope. His heart pounded. He knew what this was. After all, he'd once been a student too. A love letter. Someone had sent his daughter a love letter. And worse, she'd accepted it. It had been 3 years since the college entrance exam. There'd been no word from Yingxing since. Lin Xing, now older, thought of him less and less. As Lin Yining came out with the fruit, she caught sight of her father staring at the envelope in a daze. She walked over, guessing what he must be thinking. With a light laugh, she said, "You saw it, didn't you? That boy is kind of cute." He blushed as soon as he saw me. "I think I like him." "Dad, I want to date someone." Before she could finish, Lin Xing interrupted sternly, "No, absolutely not." "Why?" she protested, frowning. "Why?" he thought. "Because you already have Yingxing. Because that boy is fighting for your love in a world you no longer remember." He raised his voice. "No reason. You just can't. Do you understand?" Lin Yining's eyes welled with hurt. "Why not? You won't even give me a reason." Lin Xing faltered, then said quietly, "Yining, you lost your memory. You've forgotten your boyfriend. You two were together in high school." Those words stunned her, and pain exploded in her head. She gasped, clutched her temples, and dropped to her knees as sweat poured down her face. She couldn't breathe. Her thoughts were in chaos. Her skull felt like it would split open. Every fragment of memory burned, cracked, and clawed its way to the surface. Then, all at once, she remembered everything. Chapter 51, age 25. This was the world Lin Yining had come to after being reborn, but it wasn't after the college entrance exam that she was reborn. No, it was when she was 17. She had arrived in this world and met Yingxing. Why had she thought she'd been reborn again? Because Yingxing's sudden departure had left such a blow on her mind. It created a fracture, a wound so deep it made her believe she had been reborn a second time. Lin Xing sensed the change in her. He held her tightly. "Yining, have you gotten your memories back?" In her heart, she whispered, "Yes. I remember everything now." Through Lin Shiheng's explanation, she now understood why Yingxing had disappeared. Standing from Yingxing's perspective, she realized she would have made the same choice. Because she too knew what the cost of failure could be. She, too, would have chosen to protect the one she loved, even if it meant walking away. In the days that followed, Lin Yining turned down the boy named Lu Xing. Because she already had someone she could never forget. After graduating from university, she joined the family business and helped solidify the Lin group's dominance. Throughout those years, no matter how many talented, charming men tried to win her heart, she turned them all down. At 23, she received an email from Yingxing. Just one word, safe. If it weren't for her memories, she might have questioned whether Yingxing had ever existed. 5 years had passed. How many 5-year spans does one get in life? Slowly, she had begun to forget his face, the fragments of their shared past. Waiting for him became more of a duty than a desire, and that duty became the reason she rejected everyone else. On her 24th birthday, she invited her old high school classmates to her party. She was afraid of forgetting Yingxing entirely. She wanted to gather those who had known them both, hoping their presence would stir her memory, would help her hold on to what little she had left of him. It had been 6 years since she had seen them. They'd all changed, become successful, polished versions of their younger selves. Looking at Duanli, she barely recognized the boy he once was. If Duanli had changed so much, what about Yingxing? Had he already forgotten her? Duanli still spoke like the old days. "Yining Jia, you're still just as beautiful." "Hey, where's Yingxing?" "Yes, where was he?" "In Beijing," she replied quietly. Duanli blinked. "You two are doing long distance?" "You could say that." Realizing he had touched a nerve, Duanli quickly changed the subject, and the conversation turned nostalgic. At her 25th birthday party, Lin Xing spared no expense. Lin Yining sat before the vanity, staring at her reflection. She was 25. Everything felt surreal. Over the past few years, she often felt as though she had returned to her original world. All the contracts she had signed, the deals she'd struck, they were nearly identical to to what had happened before. Except for one thing. Yingxing. In her previous life, he hadn't existed. But here, he was her lover. The one she had waited for. The one she was still waiting for. As she stepped into the shimmering celebration, she felt a strange familiarity. Everything was as if drawn from her memories. Memories that didn't quite belong to this world, yet overlapped with it perfectly. Chapter 52, the end. In that moment, Lin Yinyin finally realized this wasn't a rebirth into some parallel world. The pain in her head surged, sharp, blinding. Then, everything went black. She collapsed. While unconscious, her mind replayed every moment she had lived since her supposed rebirth. Then came the shattering truth. This had always been her life. The so-called memories of her previous life, the ones without Yingxing, without her chatty father, without the 10 handsome bodyguards, they weren't real. They were false memories. A construct her mind had created to shield her from the pain of forgetting Yingxing. She had never lost her life. She had only lost her memory. When she awoke in the hospital, she saw them all, her aging father, the 10 not so handsome anymore bodyguards, and Yingxing, the boy she'd waited years for. It turned out, between the ages of 17 and 25, her life had been full, filled with love, loss, growth, success. But something had triggered her to forget it all, to forge a lie to fill in the gaps. The coma had not revealed why. As she struggled to piece it all together, Yingxing sat beside her, his eyes overflowing with longing. Yinyin, I missed you so much. Yingxing, I'm here. What happened? Why was I unconscious? Yingxing lowered his eyes. Because you saw me. What? You weren't happy in university, he murmured. You created a false memory to escape the pain. And when I appeared again, when everything came flooding back, it was too much. You collapsed. That single sentence, you weren't happy, explained everything. Tears welled in Lin Yinin's eyes. Why did you leave? Yingxing whispered. My parents passed away. I didn't have time to say goodbye. I had to take over everything. I thought, if I worked hard enough, I could come back to you sooner. But it took years. And every night, you haunted my dreams. I didn't dare see you. I was afraid you'd look at me with disappointment. In her memories, Yingxing had been a shy, stuttering boy. But this version of him had grown into a man. The choices he had made, the burdens he carried, she saw it all now. He had kept the truth from her. But he had also borne it alone. She didn't know what to do. Whether to forgive him. Whether to love him again. Their love, where would it go from here? Give me one more chance, Yingxing said, his voice trembling but firm. Let me pursue you all over again. Even if you say no, I'll stay by your side. For the rest of my life. Until you forgive me. Until you love me again. There was no longer any hesitation in him. He wasn't the timid boy she had once known. He was the man who ruled Beijing now. His life before belonged to his parents. But now, the rest of it belonged to Lin Yinyin. Was it worth it? Yes. The world wasn't always worth it. But Lin Yinyin was. She looked into his eyes. In their depths, she saw her past, her present, and maybe, her future. She slowly lifted her hand and placed it in his. Okay. She was giving him a chance. And giving herself a future, one that had him in it. Chapter 53, Extra, the other voice. The moment Yingxing received the news of his parents' death in a car accident, his mind went completely blank. How could this be? He didn't want to believe it. But reality was cruel. What had happened, had happened. There was no changing it. As soon as he got the call, chaos erupted within the Ying family. He knew he had to return and take control. He couldn't let everything his parents built fall into someone else's hands. But what about Yinyin? Yingxing wrestled with his decision. In the end, he made up his mind. This was a gamble without a clear end. He wouldn't drag Lin Yinyin into it. He would bear it alone. Yingxing returned to the chaotic battlefield that was the Ying family, and thus began a war that lasted 7 years. It wasn't until the day before Lin Yinin's 25th birthday that the battle finally ended. At last, he could see her again. During those 7 years, Yingxing sometimes felt as though he had fallen ill. A strange kind of illness born from being apart from Yinyin for too long. At times, it felt like someone else lived inside his body. Sometimes, he even spoke to that other version of himself. Who are you? Yingxing once asked aloud. A faint, trembling voice answered. I'm you. You can call me Yingxin. Yingxin could hear how frail the other voice was. It stuttered and sounded weak. But this Yingxin helped him. With cases, with decisions, with strategies. Whenever Yingxin was stuck, Yingxin was there to guide him. At first, he appeared once a month. Then it became once every 3 months. Eventually, once a year. And with each appearance, Yingxin grew weaker. Yingxin had only one wish, to return to Lin Yinin's side. Just like Yingxin, he gave his all, helping Yingxin solve every crisis. But he also knew, he was disappearing. Had he made another choice, he might have lasted longer. But the moment he chose to help Yingxin take over the Ying family, he sealed his own fate. He would vanish before he ever got to see Yinyin again. It was a cruel dilemma. He could only choose one, help Yingxin succeed, or wait and return to Yinyin. Each time Yingxin gave advice, his consciousness thinned. And as he faded, those fragments returned to Yingxin, making him stronger, sharper, more decisive. Eventually, Yingxin no longer needed him. Yingxin's awareness had been entirely exhausted. And tragically, he never made it back to see Lin Yinyin. In his final flicker of thought, before dissolving completely, Yingxin only wished for one thing, just to hold Lin Yinyin once. Even if only for a second. His existence was pure devotion. Selfless, unseen, unwavering devotion, for Yingxin, for Yinyin. Even as he disappeared, Lin Yinyin never knew he existed. But in that final moment, Yingxin felt it. Felt that something, someone, had left him. And with that, he brought the Ying family to its knees. He had won. He could finally return to Nanqing, to see her again. His first instinct, after securing his family's legacy, was to share the news, to tell the voice that had always been with him, the one who had guided him through every dark corner. Yingxin, he called softly, but no matter how many times he whispered the name, that weak voice never answered again. Yingxin didn't dare to think too much, didn't want to believe the truth. Yes, he knew. They were one and the same. But to him, Yingxin had become something more. A person. A